In this video, I'll show you how I trim a bifold door. After I do the casing on the door, I like to go one step farther. I don't like the gaps on the sides of a bifold door. Even when a bifold is installed correctly, I don't like seeing the spaces on each side of the door. This bifold hasn't been adjusted yet, but even after it's adjusted, there's going to be space on each side of the door. To get rid of this, I trim the sides with base shoe. I also use base shoe to hide the track of the bifold door. First, I'm going to explain to you what I'm trimming the bifold door out with. I'm trimming it with base shoe, and some people like to call this quarter round, and I want to show you the difference between the two. Quarter round is a quarter piece of round stock. Quarter round, in my opinion, is too stocky for trimming around a door or for trimming baseboards. Base shoe is much different. It's usually 3/4 of an inch high and a 1/2 inch wide and has a bull nose at the top. I'm going to start with the headpiece covering up the track. First, I measure jamb to jamb. This will be a straight cut with no miters. It will be straight on both ends. Now I'm going to stand this up and I'm going to put this on the top. Now, I'm not going to butt it directly against the track because I want it to stick out flush with this door, so my other piece comes on and will cover that edge. Let me explain this a little farther. If I was to push that piece of trim all the way against the track, when I go to trim around the sides, the door would rub on the trim. So I'm going to pull that piece of trim back the thickness of a strip of 16 gauge trim nails, which is a little less than 1/8 of an inch, so that when the door closes, it's not rubbing on the two pieces of trim. Here I'm marking the base shoe, so I know how far the base shoe is to be held out, because I can't hold the spacer and the trim and the nail gun at the same time. So I mark that so I can pull the trim out and know where to nail it. And you're going to turn it upside down so the flat side is up. In this sketch, I want to show you what I mean by having the flat side of the shoe up. If you were looking at a cross section from the side, this is what it would look like. And the curved side is upside down. I'm going to line our line up here. It's a little tricky to get this nail to start. And then I'm going to make that an even reveal. And now I can open the door to do this. Okay, so I can get on the my nail gun picked a great time to get dirty and not fire. Why are you doing this to me? And I'm working it down the line here because the shoe is a little bit warped. We're going to put a few nails in. You'll notice here that there is more than 1/8 of an inch between the track and the piece of shoe. That's why you need the door installed to get the spacing right. The track is centered on the door, so you have to slide a piece of whatever you're going to use for the spacing. In my case, a strip of trim nails from the trim gun. You can see here from this side view what I'm trying to accomplish. Here I'm showing you how I place the 16 gauge strip of nails. Okay, there's the top. And now I can pick the door up a little bit more if I want. You'll notice from this view the two sides are fairly plumb, but the headpiece is out of level. This is one of the door jambs in the house that I didn't take apart and rebuild.
Knowing that I was going to cover the sides with trim, I wasn't too worried about it. I'm going to adjust the top of the door so the gap looks even. If I didn't install trim on the sides to cover the gaps, you would notice this.
And now these will go on.
Now I'm ready to install the side pieces. These pieces will also be standing up. This is what it would look like if you're looking at it from the top down. This is what I'm calling the shoe standing up. If you were installing this base shoe on the floor, this area would touch the floor, thus standing up. Instead of mitering, I'm going to cope this end to the top piece.
Okay.
There are two ways you can do this.
You can lay it down.
If the gap is small enough and you have enough space, you can lay the base shoe flat. Looking at the drawing back to back, you can see the difference between the two. In this diagram, you can see what I mean by not having enough space. If you lay the shoe flat and the edge sticks over the jamb, that means you don't have enough space. To measure for the next piece, I'm going to measure from the floor to the underside of the jamb. Then I'm going to subtract 3/8 of an inch to allow for the carpeting and padding. In my case, the measurement is 81 inches. If you already have carpeting installed, push the tape into the carpeting and take your measurement from there. If you're measuring from a tile floor, no deductions are necessary.
If I was to stand it up like I'm trimming base, you would stand it up. But now I'm going to lay it flat because my other piece is flat. And you can mark it how you need to cut it to cope this joint. So I'm going to cut it this way. Okay. Cut this on a 45. And now you're going to cope this edge out here. First I'm going to cut the length down because this point will be too sharp for the tape measure to fit in. So I'm going to cut this to 80 5/8.
You heard me say 80 5/8, and you saw me take a measurement at 81. I deducted 3/8 for the carpeting because I'm having carpeting installed when I'm finished. Now this is going to be the most difficult part for somebody who's a rookie or a novice. You may want to practice coping on a piece of base or something before you try this.
A little bit difficult.
Just take your time. If it's not perfect, you can take a file or a piece of sandpaper on a wooden dowel or a Dremel tool to finish cutting out the cope.
That is coped that way. And now when we put this on, it fits over our piece at the top very nicely. And now I can nail that on and follow this gap at the bottom. Keep the margin pretty much the same. Okay, so I can open the door. Gotta be careful nailing this in.
Now you heard me say you have to be careful nailing this in. You want to make sure you're shooting the nail in fairly straight. It's a little difficult shooting this in because there's not much area to work with. If you shoot too much on an angle, the nail's going to come out through the side and you'll see it when you open the door.
Because you don't want anything to come out of the back. Make this even all the way down. scissors. Because it's a little flimsy, I'm going to put a few extra nails in. And I got it.
This is what happens when you shoot on an angle. Now I've got that piece finished, and I'll close the door to check the fit. Now that one side is trimmed, you can see the difference between the sides. One side's got a gap, and the other side you can't see anything. Now I'll do the same thing to the other side. Measure from the floor up. I don't show it here, but if you don't do much of this, you should put your piece up against the trim and mark the angle in which you need the miter, just like I did on the first piece. Miters can get a bit confusing, so it's better to mark it this way so when you get back to cutting, you'll know which way to turn the saw.
The long point.
Now I'll measure the length before I cope it. Cut it to length. The next step is coping.
The tip breaks a little bit. It's not a huge deal. It's the hardest one to cope for me. Shoe is very fragile. It can crack on you. It's a little awkward.
If you look here, when I lay the piece of trim up to the other piece, it doesn't quite sit very tight. That's because I didn't cope it at enough of an angle, so I'll have to go back and cut a little bit out of the back end so that it'll fit flush to the next piece of trim.
Go on an angle enough here. So I'm going to.
You can also use a file, sandpaper, or a Dremel tool to clean the back part of it out. Now it fits nicely and it's ready to nail on.
And you may want to take the door off to do this one because you need to get in there on an angle. So I am going to lift up on the door.
You should take the door off so you can get the nail gun in straight. If you shoot it on an angle, it'll blow out at the back side. Now just line it up to the piece of trim and shoot it in.
Follow your margin.
Make sure you keep an even reveal all the way down. After you're finished nailing it, reinstall the bifold to check for fit. This is the extra step I take to trim out a bifold door. Now I'll caulk the seams and fill the nail holes. If you'd like to know how to fill nail holes and trim, click on the video in the lower left corner. Until next time, thanks for watching.